advance. We're up? Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the 5th meeting of the Berkeley History Club. Hey, give yourself a hand. If you missed the first 4, you can find 3 of them on YouTube. Look up Berkeley History Club. The 4th one, we're gonna tape one of these days and put it on there. The club has 2 goals: build community and have fun talking about history. Anybody having fun yet? All right. Now, we have to say thanks to Berkeley Fellowship of Unitarian Universalists. They let us use the facilities. And you know what? It's one of the most interesting religions. I never knew you could have a religion without a creed. Like if you go here and you say, well, what do you guys believe? And they're like, what do you mean? We don't have beliefs. Right? You come and you bring your beliefs, and that's fine. I'm personally an agnostic, so we have agnostics, atheists, Christians, Buddhists, Hindus. The large variety you could think of. We have, from time to time, some of those people come in here. So, and pagans, thank you. Yay for pagans. So, I'm sorry? I know, it's just for the effect. So Sunday, we have meetings on Sundays, and there's activities like a writing group. There's a social justice committee if you want to change the world. There's support groups, and a movie lovers group is just about ready to start, but not tonight. Tonight we have 3 speakers, and after each speech there'll be question and answers, and we're going to give time for discussion too. Hopefully that we can fit that in. Tonight's speakers will be Hank Pellisier. He's talking about the history of the caste system in Kerala, India. And Hank leads a nonprofit organization that works with dalits, also referred to as untouchables. Joanna Foley will speak on the African-American participation in the Revolutionary War. She's an expert on Revolutionary War monuments. And I will speak on the familial relationships between Jesus and the 12 disciples. Let's get started. This speech is given in honor of Dr. James Tabor from the University of Carolina of Charlotte. He earned his PhD in Biblical Studies at the University of Chicago and is an expert on Christian origins. He is the first and only person that I have seen who has linked some of the 12 disciples to Jesus' natural family. Let's see, a little bit about myself. So, I grew up as a Christian and now consider myself an agnostic or atheist. I have been a plumber, a missionary, and what else did I do? A teacher, elementary school teacher. So thanks, Margaret. And I also have to thanks Margaret for all the work that she did and everyone else who put this thing together, and our great tech person in the back corner, and the new video person in the back corner, that's Paul Nordine and Marianne. Thank you. So, yeah, I used to be a Christian, and I started studying the Christian faith, and it made me leave the religion. The study of it made me leave the religion, but I don't recommend that to anybody. I actually loved being a Christian, so I don't recommend going down that path. I do recommend going down the path of study. Studying Jesus has been the most interesting thing. I've been studying him for 33 of the last 37 years. I think about stuff about the historical Jesus all the time. And anyway, the study of Jesus is the study of the Judean people who lived in Israel during the 1st century. They had the law, a gift given by God to tell them how to live, how to treat each other. It was the contract, a holy agreement between the people and God himself. It said if they only worshiped him, got rid of all foreign gods, icons, representations, then God would bless them. The land would flow with milk and honey. The borders would be established and the country protected from foreign attack. The only problem, however, was that in the 1st century, the Romans were in control. They marched through the land with their standards, which had on them the representations of their gods. How could this land of Judea ever be blessed of God as long as the Romans were in charge? In the first century, there were many rebels who fought back. Whole families would join in the fight against the Roman occupation of Judea. The dream of these rebels was to establish the kingdom of God in Israel, to throw off the yoke of the Roman control. Jesus declared himself, according to the New Testament, to be king of Israel, thus marking himself a rebel against Roman power. We would expect Jesus' natural family to be part of his movement because, according to our sources, around the first century in Judea, if one person in a family rebelled against Roman power, it was common for every other family member to also rebel. So this is, almost every family member that's mentioned by name, if they had a brother or father rebel against Roman power, they also did that. So it's a family thing. Now, the two main sources for the history of the first century Judea are the New Testament and the writings of the historian Josephus. I'm sure you've seen a Bible before. The writings of Josephus. That's it. Could you imagine? You got 2 books here, and you could spend 33 years of your life just with these 2 books. It's like amazing. There's another guy on Facebook, David Allen, I think his name is. He spent like 10 years studying just 2 paragraphs. There's 2 paragraphs in this book that talk about Jesus, right? So he spends like 10 years of his life just studying those 2 paragraphs and trying to figure out, was this an interpolation? Did somebody just add this in? Was it real? What's real, what's not? So it's really fascinating to people. Josephus was under the employment of the Romans and worked in Rome. The number one rebel against Roman power was Judas, the son of the freedom fighter Hezekiah. So over there on the far side. Paul, is it better if I walk over there or just point from this spot? Whatever. Okay, let's walk. Good. Got my notes on one side and the other thing on the other side. Okay, the number one rebel against Roman power was Judas, son of the freedom fighter Hezekiah. The son was named Judas. Now, his dad was a freedom fighter known throughout the whole country, Hezekiah, right? And according to Josephus, here is the family tree of Judas, Hezekiah and Judas. Because he was a rebel, he had to use many aliases and had to keep on the move to stay alive and keep up the fight against the Romans. We have covered this material in earlier meetings, so you are free to watch on YouTube. I can't repeat it all. Won't be able to get anything else done tonight. Tonight I'll refer to him as either Judas, son of Sepphoris, which was his first alias, or sometimes I'll call him Judas of Galilee, which is the most popular one. If you look up on the internet and you type in Judas of Galilee, that's the one that's the most popular alias. Now, that's one of the things that makes this whole study so interesting is because this guy, who his dad was basically a criminal in the Romans' eyes, and got his head chopped off for it. Yes. Hezekiah is the dad. The son is Judas, son of Sepphoris. Sepphoris is a city. See, he couldn't call himself son of Hezekiah because then you're saying like you're son of like Benedict Arnold or something, right? That he could be the Romans. If the Romans knew that, they would probably catch him, throw him off, probably sell him off as a slave. Sepphoris is this town right here, 4 miles to the northwest of our town that we know of Nazareth. Right? Yes, Mary? No. It's well, you're giving away the whole plot. No, you are. You're giving away the whole plot. But for right now, we're not saying this is Judas Iscariot or anything like that. That comes the next class. Yeah. It's Judas, son of Sepphoris. Judas was a popular name back then. Thank you, Margaret. Man, you people are awesome. Okay. Let's see, where are we? Hezekiah, freedom fighter, nationally known soldier. He died for the cause. In Sepphoris, capital of the province of Galilee. I'm going to walk over there so you can see it. So in Sepphoris, capital of the province of Galilee, just a couple of miles northwest of Nazareth, lived his son Judas. He went by many aliases, like I said. The first that we have record of is, as I said, Judas, son of Sepphoris. He couldn't call himself, okay, I'm repeating myself, sorry. Judas, son, he had to keep it secret that Hezekiah was his father. And that's the kind, because the Romans might sell him off into being into slavery. That's the kind of thing the Romans would do against rebels if they didn't kill him outright. Now, he grows up and he has sons. Here are his sons. We have Jair, James, and Simon. We don't know if Jair was involved in the rebellion or not. There's no record of that. But James and Simon were, and were crucified for it. About 11, 12 years after Jesus was crucified, those two brothers were crucified. Judas becomes a great rabbi, a teacher. He moves to Jerusalem and with fellow Rabbi Matthew attract people from around the whole country to hear them speak. They make a move against a Golden Eagle edifice with their students. This is called the Golden Eagle Affair and can be found on the internet and the writings of Josephus. Matthew and 40 students are captured by Roman soldiers, killed. Matthew and some of the students actually burned alive. Judas escapes. He makes it back to Sepphoris. Now, the problem with the name that he picked earlier was he called himself Judas, son of Sepphoris, and after this crime of knocking down the Golden Eagle, the Romans know exactly where to look for him. Because fugitives, when they go on the lam, they go back to their home first and try to get some money, some support, get a car, go to Mexico, whatever. So they knew where to go to look for him. That was the problem. He didn't know that was going to happen, right? When he picked that name. Yes? Before Jesus. Yeah, this is in the year 4 BCE. Matter of fact, this is right at the time when Mary gets pregnant. All this stuff happens really fast. Like within 1 year, like this whole story, a lot of this story is going to happen. Yeah, the rebellion happened, and then Mary gets pregnant. Yeah, it's really, really close. So he arrives in Sepphoris. He leads the citizens in an attack on the palace and the armory. He gets weapons, takes over the province of Galilee. He knew he wouldn't be in charge very long. He had about a month before the Roman legions would arrive and retake the city, which they did, burning down about a third of it, according to the archaeologists. Before their arrival, though, he's reported to have plundered the province. Now that's the description that Josephus gives us, who's working for the Romans. So the historian working for the Romans said he plundered Galilee, right? So you have to keep that in mind, the bias that the Roman historian, the Jew working for the Romans, the bias that he had. Picture this. Judas, son of Sepphoris, and his men have just captured the armory in Sepphoris. It's the year 4 BCE. They've armed themselves, and now with their weapons, they are going house to house, plundering the rich, taking from the houses what they wanted. Women would be yelling, "Cleopas, Cleopas, you're taking all, you're taking all." Cleopa in Greek means he takes all. Cleo means steal, from which we get our part of speech, klepto. And pa means all. This man of aliases chose for one of his next aliases, Cleopas. You find this in the Gospel of Luke. Cleopas is the same name as Clopas and Alphaeus, and this is covered in the first year. So why would he call himself Cleopas? He takes all. Well, actually, Cleopas has another meaning. Judas, son of Sephras, often picked aliases that had more than one meaning. It also meant son of glorious father. Cleo meaning, also, another meaning for Cleo, was glorious or good report, like good news, right? And Pa, in this case, refers to a man. It's the male version of the name Cleopatra. Her name meaning daughter of a glorious father. It was a royal name, and he himself, Judas of Galilee, had claimed royalty for himself. So with his name, he gets to connect himself with another royal person, Cleopatra. He gets to honor his glorious father, Hezekiah, whom he never gets to mention, and he gets to secretly remember the days of plundering the rich of Sepphoris. So that's the kind of thing this guy, remember, he's like a genius, right? He was so good at speaking that he attracted people from the whole nation, so he must be like a genius. So the name transliterated into Aramaic, the language of the people, would have been Clopas, meaning to exchange, to change, to transit. A perfect name for a trader, a person who travels in caravans going from place to place, exchanging wares. Being a trader is possibly what he does next. He had a lot of loot, and what else could he do with it? He knew the Roman legions were coming, and there probably wouldn't be enough time to take the loot and sell it for weapons to fight off the Romans. He could have split the takings with the militia that he had under his control, or he could have given them some and kept a lot for future actions against the Romans. In any case, the sources tell us the Romans reconquered the city, reconquered the country, bringing the whole country under their control again. And then they did what Romans would do. Wanting to teach the Judeans a lesson, they crucified up to 2,000 people throughout the country. Now that's found in Josephus, and he's known to exaggerate. So maybe it was 200. But it was hundreds of people throughout the whole country were crucified, according to Josephus. Judas escaped again, possibly fleeing north out of the country completely, acting as a trader and selling the loot in other nearby countries. Edessa was about 350 miles away, and it would take a few months to get there, exchange the loot for other goods, and return. Edessa would have been a safe place to go. At that time, it wasn't under the control of the Romans. There's a story told of Jesus' son, Judas Thaddeus. Let me see, where are we at, Judas Thaddeus? Right here. There's a story told of him, let's see where I'm at. The story told of him 30 years later, fleeing Israel after Jesus is crucified. He goes to Edessa and makes connections with the king there. So how would a poor man from Judea, this Judas Thaddeus, in the year like around 33 Common Era, right after his dad dies, or his dad was crucified, how would he get an audience with the king of Edessa? I used to live in Haiti, and I tried to speak with the with the head bishop in Haiti, and it was Aristide. You guys probably have heard of him, right? So I tried to speak with him. I wanted to show a film at his church. So it was like, if you want to speak to him, you have to come like on a Tuesday from 10 to 12. And so I did, and I sat there and waited. And then finally I was the last person that he saw. So anyway, it's hard if you're just a commoner, like I was, just a commoner. You want to go talk to a big shot. Now, what if you wanted to go connect with the king, right? So how would a poor man from Judea, get an audience with the king of Edessa? If his grandfather, though, Judas of Galilee, had traveled there earlier and given him gifts that were stolen from the palace and the rich of Sepphoris, maybe this grandfather, this Judas of Galilee, started a connection between the Jesus family and the royal family of Edessa. This is a maybe. This is just a possibility. In that scenario, it would seem plausible that Judas Thaddeus could have made contact with the king 30 years later. Was it immoral for him to steal from the rich of Sepphoris? In his defense, the rich never followed the law of the year of Jubilee. When the country of Israel was set up, 1,000 years earlier, whatever it was, hundreds and hundreds of years earlier, and the land was distributed between the families. They had the right to sell it, or we should say more, lease it. Every 50 years, the land, the basis of wealth in an agrarian society, was supposed to be given back to the original families free of charge. That happened that was supposed to happen, and it was called the year of Jubilee. Because the rich never followed this law, there's no record that they ever did it, even once. They got richer and richer, and the poor never got what was rightfully due them. The rich broke the lease. They never followed this law, and thus the wealth they accumulated was rightly owed to the poor. The Romans come down, they reconquer Sepphoris, they sell everyone in the city off. They sell them off into slavery and repopulate the town with people that supported the empire. This area, now the strange thing is, Judas of Galilee, or Judas, son of Sepphoris, right? He goes there, he overthrows the Romans living there, and then he has to flee and whatever. And then the safest place for him in the whole country is going back to where he just fled. That's irony for you, right? The safest place in the whole country would be for him to go back. Why? Because nobody in town knows him. The Romans had sold everybody off as slaves, so nobody in the whole town would know him. He takes a new alias. He goes back to, the records show that he goes to Nazareth, just a little bit north of, thank you, southeast. Thank you. He goes to Nazareth, and he marries Mary. And so now the story, this is the story we've heard all our life, right? Mary's Mary. Oh, you didn't hear this part. They had a pair of twins. Okay, where are we at here? Right there. All right. So Joseph and Mary get married. They have a pair of twins. They have Jesus and his twin Judas. This is covered in an earlier video. I can't repeat myself on that. Sorry about that. And let's see. Judas. Yes, sorry. It's the same guy. This guy, this is just one alias, is Judas, son of Sepphoris. Next alias he takes, Joseph. Next alias he takes, Cleopas, which also is Alphaeus. That's just a different way to pronounce it. So it's actually the Aramaic word is Halphi. Some people pronounce it Halphi. Some people pronounce it Calphi. So Halphi becomes Alphaeus. Calphi becomes Cleopas. So it's a pronunciation thing. So these are the same names. And so one guy has three aliases. Judas, son of Sepphoris. He actually has way more than that, but at least three on this paper. Joseph, and then Cleopas. So, and he's starting a family here. He marries Mary, has Jesus and Judas. Now, Judas, his nickname was Thomas, or twin. And Judas has a son called son of twin, Bar Tome. Jesus has a son, Judas Thaddeus. And if you want to learn about that, read about the Talpiot tomb, because that's where the evidence that Jesus had this son, Judas Thaddeus. Thaddeus means the beloved or the courageous one. So anyway, Jesus grows up and we did that. In Capernaum, while one family was being created in Nazareth, this is the Nazareth family, another one was being created most likely in the town of Capernaum. Matthew, the local tax collector, was there and claimed this guy as his father. And he had another son, this guy, our hero, Judas of Galilee, has another son named Menahem. You could read a lot about him in the writings of Josephus. Let's take a look at the list of the disciples. Okay, this is my favorite part. Let's see, I need a pen, though. No, I need the pen, the big fat pen. All right. Okay. Yes? Yes. Yeah. This was his first family, which that's right. This is his second family, and at the same time he starts his family, he starts a third family. The mother of this family, he probably divorced her, which he needed to do to protect her, because if the Romans find out, The people knew that she used to be married to that guy. All of a sudden, someone had to just report that to the Romans, and all of a sudden you have a hostage deal going on, threat of slavery, the whole thing. So this woman, if to be nice to her, he would have divorced her, let her start her life, give her that letter of divorce so she could have it with her in her house, remarry, and then she could say, I have nothing to do with that guy. He divorced me, and that would maybe help protect her. Then he remarries. But this time he marries two different people, Mary and whoever he married here. We don't have her name. Let's see, where are we at? Oh, yeah. Okay. It looks like the members of the extended family of Jesus become his disciples. Like I said earlier, Dr. James Tabor is the first and only person that I've seen that has brought up this idea. You can read his argument in his book, The Jesus Dynasty. He argues that these three individuals are three disciples. So he argues in his book that, let me see, where are we at? Yeah, right here. Okay, Dr. Tabor argues that Judas and James and Simon are actually the three disciples of Jesus. He says that, so I actually believe his argument is right, and I apply math to the problem, and it shows that he's right. And to check the math on that, just watch the video. So anyway, so Dr. Tabor says that this guy right here, James, son of Alphaeus, is one of Jesus' relatives, and that would be, looking over there, that would be Jesus' brother. Okay. Does bro work for everybody? His bro, okay? Then the other one is Judas Thaddeus, which I actually argue that is actually his son. And the third one is this Simon, which Dr. Tabor argues that it's another brother of his. We've already, so it's this one, and this one. Those three guys. So, Margaret, would you mind getting me some Post-its, the blue ones, they're right over here, and maybe just like putting them next to people that we they're in here. If you pull out just one, do you mind doing that, or if you don't want to? Yeah, little. No, there's right there, that one. Can you pull off one and stick it like right next to this person's name, just so the people will. They're loose because I already did this once. Yeah, if you stick it to their name, just sort of people have a sense that we talked about that one. And then one right as close as you can to their name so people have a sense that we've already covered that person. So we're going to eliminate these one at a time. Thanks, Margaret. You don't mind doing this? That was nice. I know, they might not stick because I've already used them once. Let's see. We've already talked about how Judas Thomas is Jesus' twin brother. So Thomas would be his twin. Yeah. That would be his twin brother. Matthew the tax, let's see. Bartholomew would be his nephew. Sorry about that. Nephew? No, Bartholomew. Okay. Matthew the tax collector, it says, we're way over here, Margaret. Matthew the tax collector as a son, it's over there, as a son of Alphaeus, as mentioned in the New Testament, would be a brother of James. This is according to the New Testament. and thus at least a half-brother of Jesus. Because the New Testament said, well, we've basically established that this guy is Jesus' brother, so Matthew would be at least a half-brother, if not a full brother. At the third meeting of the History Club, we argued that Mary Magdalene was Jesus' wife, and the Gospel of Philip says that Philip was a brother of Mary's, thus he would be Jesus' brother-in-law. So that PH stands for Philip. I ran out of room. I don't know about this kneeling thing. How many bet I'm going to do this one more time before the evening's over? Let's see. This catches us up to pretty much the content that we covered in earlier club events. Now let's talk about Jair, the one closest to you. There's no record of Jair being a disciple, but maybe he is the Jair mentioned in the New Testament. Sure. Maybe he's this guy mentioned in the New Testament. Who in the New Testament they say that Jair was a synagogue official living in Capernaum. His daughter, referred to as Talitha, was sick and thought to be dead. Jesus came and raised her up. He said she was only asleep. So the question is, are there two Jairs or is there one? So let's see. To apply the math, what I did is I applied math to the question. To apply the math to the question of whether or not these two individuals are one and the same, we do the following. There are 18 unaccounted for named people mentioned in the New Testament that were close to Jesus and living in Galilee. 18. If you look in the whole New Testament, that's the limit that you'll find in that scenario. To find the odds of finding one Jair in this group of 18, we multiply 18 times the ratio of the name frequency of Jair. Now, Talleyrand wrote a book. It's a lexicon, and it gives you the name frequency of all these characters. So the name frequency of Jair is 10 over 2509, 10 over 2509. This ratio we get from that book. The odds of finding one Jair, when you do the math, is 1 over 14, or 7%. So the odds of finding two Jairs is the square of the odds of finding one. For example, let's say you wonder about the odds of rolling a 5. Now, 5 is my favorite number. So if you have a 6-sided dice and you roll it, what's the odds of rolling a 5? And everybody knows it's 1/6. No, that's right. That's what you're supposed to do. The odds of getting two 5s is 1/6 squared, or 1/6 times itself. 1/6 times 1/6 equals 1 over 36. So the odds of finding one Jair in a crowd of 18 people is 1 over 14. Is 1 over 14. The odds of finding two Jairs is 1 over 14 times 1 over 14, or 1 over 196. It is 14 times more likely that there's one Jair in the group of 18 people than that there are two Jairs. Now, this kind of stuff, it bugs the heck out of me. I hate this stuff. I mean, I'd use it because it helps me understand stuff, but it's just like it's really hard. I just was wondering, does it matter? Well, basically, we're just trying to see what happened to all these people. I'm curious about this guy's sons. What did they do? So if we could link these people to those people, then it helps us fill out the story.
So Jesus didn't just run around and just see guys and they just followed him. You're saying all these people have some familial relationship.
Exactly.
Okay, so the Simon Peter at the top, is that the same Simon, only at the top of your list over there? Only the one that in the Bible they say Jesus changed his name to Peter, the rock?
Right. That's that guy. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it is. So we're talking. Ah, good. You can leave it there, honey, for now. We might not need it. Okay. Well, anyway. Okay, so I hate this. The whole thing I just did with the numbers. I'll just wait till you're done. Just leave it there for now. It's okay. The whole thing with the numbers drives me crazy. I hate this stuff. I'm a visual learner. So I just talked about Jair, right? This is what I like. Graphs that show you at a second what we're talking about. So I'm talking about the chance of finding 2 Jairs in a small group of 18 is like 6%. The odds of finding 1 is 94%. In other words, if you're going to find either 1 or 2, it's way more likely that you're only going to find 1 because the name is so rare. So that's what we're talking about. When you look at this, also history is a work of studying the probabilities of something. Like you never know. All this stuff I'm talking about, we can't say for sure this happened, right? It's all about probabilities. So, but it's really cool. If you can apply math, apply it because that will inform what you're trying to do. So right here, we know that we can say comfortably that there was only 1 Jair. There wasn't 2. And now we have a lot of information. First point, Jair was the son of Judas Galilee's first wife. Now, how do we know that? Because he got married 3 times, so now I have to pull it up. Can you pull this off? Because we have to move it. I don't know where to put it, but we'll put it somewhere. Thank you. Okay, so all we know for sure, the New Testament, what is it? Josephus says Jair was the son of Judas. I'm saying it was the son of the first wife, but it could have been the second wife, third wife, right? So how do we know it was the first wife? Well, Jair got married 3 times. Once he got married once before the Golden Eagle affair of 4 BCE, and twice afterwards. He had 3 wives at least. Jesus, I said Jair, didn't I? That was bad. No, I'm supposed to mean Judas of Galilee. Thank you. Feel free to correct me as we go along. Jesus ministered for 1 to 3 years, according to most scholars, and they also think, in general, that he died between 30 to 33 CE. That would mean that Jesus was ministering to Talitha, raising her from the dead, or maybe she was just asleep. Most likely, sometime between 27 to 32 Common Era. The culture of that time was that men would become leaders in the synagogue after the age of 30. So Jair, being a leader, must have been older than 30, and thus born from Judas of Galilee's first wife. So because of that cultural thing about the men had to be at least 30, that would make him, for all these ages to work out, he had to be over there. The first one. Okay. Second point. Capernaum was the possible place of Judas of Galilee's other home. I'm arguing that Judas of Galilee's first home was Sepphoris, then he moves to Nazareth, right next to Sepphoris, and has a second home in Capernaum. Capernaum was the possible place of Judas of Galilee's other home. He had, I just said that, and he would need a place and his third wife would need a place for a home, so it was most likely was Capernaum. Jair with his children, Talitha, and Lazarus, and any others along with his wife were living there. Matthew, the tax collector, was also living there with any of his family, if he had any. Judas of Galilee must have at least spent some time there visiting his grandkids and his 2 sons, Matthew and Jair. Capernaum was very important to the offspring of Judas of Galilee. Jesus later, during his ministry, moves his whole operation there from Nazareth and makes it his new home base. Third point. It shouldn't surprise us that Jair rose to the level of being a leader in the synagogue. His dad, Judas of Galilee, was a nationally famous rabbi. So it shouldn't surprise us that Jair, in the New Testament, a leader in the synagogue, was this leader in the synagogue because his dad was this nationally known, famous rabbi, and who might have taught him. His dad also must have been the one who trained Jesus to be a great rabbi. What about Lazarus? right? This name Lazarus, doesn't that make you think of somebody in the New Testament? Exactly. Thank you. So Lazarus, in Josephus, he doesn't use the name Lazarus. He uses the name Eleazar. It's the same name. I'm going to use Lazarus, so try to get the confusion down lower. So this guy, was this guy the same guy as the guy in the New Testament? In this family, there was a person named Lazarus who was raised from the dead. Did I write it up there? No, I didn't. In this family, he's not there. But in the New Testament, there's a guy named Lazarus. You all know it. He was supposedly raised from the dead. And that's in the New Testament, right? And his sister, let's see, there was a person named Lazarus and a person raised from the dead. His sister Talitha and his family there was a person raised from the dead. A person, boy, it's confusing. So what we have here is we have in the New Testament it says Jair had a daughter named Talitha, but we just established that Jair is the same guy as that Jair, and that guy Jair had a son named Lazarus. So we know that Talitha had a brother named Lazarus, right? Because this Jair is that Jair. So Talitha has a brother named Lazarus. And doesn't it sound weird that this guy Jair has two kids, both whose stories have been created that said both of them raised from the dead? Talitha, that's the New Testament in the book of Mark, and Lazarus in the book of John. So that's like what's going on here. So either it's according to John, right? Yeah, right. That's according to John. Yeah. Thanks, Mary. Marjorie. Okay, let's see. Let's see. In all of life, so either it's just a coincidence that there were two families close to Jesus that had a person raised from the dead and a person named Lazarus, or there's a reason for it, right? So in all of life, everything either happens for a reason or for no reason. There's no other choice, right? Everything that happens, it either happens for a reason or no reason. Everything that happens for a reason, or it's just random. It's just a coincidence. Using math, we can measure the coincidence, the odds of something happening by chance. In this case, the odds, by chance only, that there would be two families close to Jesus with these two features is figured out like this. So I actually am going to skip this part because it's just a whole bunch of math again. But I'm going to show you the results of it. So we're looking at Lazarus, and we're trying to answer this question. Is there one Lazarus or two Lazarus that's connected to Jesus, right? So the chance that there's two, 14%. The chance that there's one, 86%. Now, wasn't that a lot easier? Okay, so. Therefore, it's 7 times more likely that that there was only one Lazarus. And now, the exciting thing about that is, if you want to know what happened to the guy in the book of John, Lazarus, who was supposedly raised from the dead, you wanted to know what happened to him? Read Josephus. There's a paragraph. He's the guy that was in Masada. Remember Masada? At the end of the war, almost at the end of the Jewish war against the Romans in the year 72, I think it is, 73, right around that time, the Romans had come down, laid siege to Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and all the rebels were dead except for in Masada, and the leader of that group in Masada was our friend Lazarus, the same guy that the story in the New Testament talks about, raised from the dead. But that guy was there, and the Romans laid siege to Masada. They couldn't knock down the walls because of the cliff, so they built a mountain, a big, long ramp, all the way up to the top. It took, months to build a ramp. The ramp is still there. You could go to Google, you could see it. So, so they build this ramp. They get the siege equipment up there. They knock down the wall, and it's late, So the next day, they're planning to go in and kill everybody. Well, not really kill. What they would probably do is haul them off to Rome, put them in a parade, show off what they've done, abuse them, and then kill them. So our hero, Lazarus, convinces everybody, and there might have been other people who also convinced them that we should commit suicide and take away that thing that they can do to us. It was all about freedom, fighting for freedom, dying for freedom. Now, Menahem, right here, this Menahem is the son of is the grandson of Hezekiah, son of Judas, and he's found in Josephus. Actually, there's more written about him. There's quite a bit of stuff, and I'm not gonna go into that. But he is actually found in the New Testament. There's a whole, there's an argument about that. It can be laid. I'm gonna skip that because we're running out of time. But it's really cool. All these people, all this whole family here, are found either as a disciple or they're found in the New Testament. So let's see. Now, James, where are we at? So, Margaret, can you mark him for me, please? Okay, so if you look at the first chart on Hezekiah, we have everybody, everybody's has been, not acknowledged except for James and Simon. Now, let's talk about James. Let's see. Was that James a disciple? That's the question. Looking at the unaccounted family members and the disciples, we have a total of 9 people. Now, we could do the math, right? We do the math. The frequency of James, of that name, comes up 2 out of 100. So it's 2%. But to save us from talking about all that stuff, which is hard to talk about that stuff, I just gave you a little graph here. The chance of there being 2 James, that those guys are not the same person, is 6%. And it's 14 times more likely that they are the same person, that there's only 1 James. So that gives us the evidence we need, the strength of argument that we can say this guy becomes the disciple right there. And he would be a half-brother because Mary is not the mother. We don't know who the mother, so he'd be a half-brother. Now, so it's very likely that James, the son of Judas of Galilee, is the same person as James, the supposed son of Zebedee. This is James, the son of Zebedee, supposed son of Zebedee. How could that happen? Well, after the Golden Eagle affair, Judas of Galilee would need to do something with his children. He could have drugged them around while he was looting. He could have drugged them around while he was forming a militia, while he was attacking the palace, while he was attacking the armory, while he formed a militia, and possibly fighting the Romans, while he traveled to the desert. He could have drugged those kids around, all that, right? But it would be safer to find someone to look after him. We know his sons survived into the 40s when they were crucified. So he did something to help them survive. Thus, we know that Judas of Galilee was able to protect them somehow. This idea of getting someone else to claim them as their children would be probably the best way to protect them. It should be noted that both James, the son of Judas of Galilee, and James, the son of Zebedee, were said to be killed by the Romans between the years 44 and 48, a confirmation that we're talking about the same person. Now, fishing with a boat. If James is going to survive with his father, Judas of Galilee, without his father around, Judas of Galilee around, he's going to need to be able to do some kind of career, some kind of way to support himself. Looking at all possible careers, it seems that fishing with a boat is uniquely the best career for someone who needs to hide, for a fugitive or a son of a fugitive. It's amazing if you think about it. Fishing with a boat. Okay, so of all the jobs, let's say you need a job and you're a fugitive living in Palestine 2,000 years ago. Now, and everybody knows you. your dad is a nationally known hero. So everybody knows you, and they know who your dad is, and so you have to find some job to support yourself. Well, what would you do? You can't take any job in a town because that's around people. But you could try to find jobs in the rural area. Now, there's 3 basic jobs in the rural area. There's working on a farm, being a shepherd, or fishing. There's 2 kinds of fishing. There's line fishing, like fishing from the shore, and there's fishing with a boat. So the problem with being a farmer is where are you going to buy, you buy all that land to be a farmer, and then you wait, 4 months to eat, right? The Romans come, you have to leave the land and flee. That's not a good choice for a job, right? Shepherd, same difference. You buy all the sheep. Romans come, what are you going to do? Come on, sheep, let's go escape from the Romans. That ain't going to work. So you got to have to leave the sheep behind. So the only 2 good choices if you're a fugitive is fishing, right? But if between the 2, fishing with the boat is way more smart. The Romans come, jump in the boat, cross the lake. They actually did that. In the year 66, the Romans were chasing down some people. The rebels jumped in some boats. They went across the lake, got away from the Romans. So that's what you'd want to do. That's the only job that's practical, is doing that job. And lo and behold, Judas of Galilee has a friend that he trusts so much that he gives his son to be his dad, to be his adopted dad. And lo and behold, this guy Zebedee is actually a fisherman with a boat. Wow, what luck, right? And not only that, he's in the part, here's the lake, here's the Sea of Galilee. Sorry, Margaret. Here's the Sea of Galilee, and that's the place you'd go fishing if you had a boat, right? But the shore isn't all equally the same. Around this part, the roads went like this and down here to Jerusalem. People didn't like to go through Samaria because there's too much struggle, too much fighting between these 2 groups. There was a lot of animosity. It wasn't really safe to go this way. So most of the time they came down this way. So there was a lot of travel down this way. So this part is not the good part of the lake to be in if you are a fugitive. You want to be on this side of the lake. About 3/5 of the lake was good, 2/5 not good. So turns out, Zebedee turns out to be living in Bethsaida and the good part of the lake. So if you do the odds of that all happening, it turns out that it's there's no way that this was just luck. It was planned. And also it makes sense that Zebedee would have been fleeing along with James. Zebedee, the friend of Judas of Galilee, the fugitive, the friend that he trusted so much. Everybody knew that these guys were friends, right? Or at least some people would know that. And so then wouldn't he have to flee also? So the deal is what happened was, most likely, right? History's always about most likely. The most likely deal was they all fled. They had money from the seller. They probably sold their stuff as fast as they could, got money from the loot of that Judas of Galilee collected, and they all hightailed it over to Bethsaida and started a fishing business. It was 2 guys. It was James. Simon went with Zebedee's partner, who also had a boat, right? So these guys probably just went over there, started a fishing business. It was the safest business to be in. And there's other sources that tell us that this area of the country was zealot country, this area, which totally makes sense. It's the furthest away from the Roman power. You can escape into the north or away from the Romans, go into other countries. There's right here was a division of 2 different provinces. So if you get in trouble in this province, go across the border, you're in the other province. You could also escape by lake. So this is no wonder, it makes sense the zealots were there. Judas of Galilee is basically called as the person who started the whole zealot movement. So it makes totally sense that they're there in that area. It's from zeal, there was a person in the Old Testament that had so much zeal for the Lord that, there's a whole story behind that. And so they chose that name for that reason. So it turns out that not only was James turned into a fisherman First, he's the son of the most famous rabbi, and then he later becomes a fisherman, but it's also the same with his brother. And if you want to look at the stats on that guy, a diagram of the stats, you have Peter. The chance of there's being one Peter is 83%. So mostly likely there's just one guy. And so Simon, so this Simon is this Simon. So we should write that's one half brother. Okay. Now, John was the stepbrother of James. So we're going to put him down as a stepbrother. And Andrew was the stepbrother of Simon Peter. So we'll put him down as a stepbrother. So as you see that every one of these characters fill up all the disciples list, except for one, Judas Iscariot. And all of these guys are all filled up except for two, Joseph and, well, Jesus, and this guy, Judas. So isn't it weird? You got everybody filled up, everybody's accounted for except for two guys, Judas over there and Joseph, and Judas over there. So if you come back next time, I'm going to try to argue that this guy, Judas, son of Cephas, turned out to be Judas Iscariot, but he didn't betray Jesus. I'm going to try to make that argument. If you come back again, we'll try to talk about that next time. It looks like it was part of a failed military action against the Romans, and I'm going to try to make that argument. Thank you so much. I went way past my time. Does anybody have any questions? Hank. Oh, let me give you the mic. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, my question goes way, way back to the beginning. Who was Josephus who wrote about this? My understanding is he's the only person who wrote about this. And did you say that he only wrote 2 paragraphs about Jesus? And if so, what else did he write about? And why did he only write 2 paragraphs about Jesus?
What were his sources?
Yeah, right. So Josephus was born about a couple of years after Jesus died. So his most famous source was Nicholas of Damascus, who was a respected, intelligent person at the time. And the other sources I'm not sure about. So a lot of people argue that the 2 paragraphs about Jesus was just a Christian interpolation into this book because the Christians had control of this book after it was written. There's a large also group of scholars think that part of it's interpolation and part of it's the words of Josephus. So like I said, the person I know on Facebook spent 10 years on that question alone. Did I answer your question? Yeah. This 2 paragraphs, that's it. Wow. Yeah. Tom. Oh, can you pass the mic down for him, please?
He was a historian, right? He was
Yes.
a historian working for the Romans rather than getting killed by the Romans.
Exactly.
So he was just doing history, so he had very little to do with Jesus.
Right. Yeah, and he also was he was born after Jesus. He was born in the year 37 Common Era, and Jesus is said to have died in 30 or 33 Common Era, maybe 37. So they didn't really overlap. Let me grab the mic. Thanks.
Was Josephus Jewish?
Yes, he was Jewish. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, I really appreciate that you guys allowed me to finish that. I thought it was way longer than I thought. We're going to take a couple minutes break, and then Hank is going to come up and talk to us about the dalits and other things. And then after that, we'll have Joanna. Thank you so much. I know, I was shocked too.
What do you do with this?
Oh, I'll take it. twist one way, and then they come out, supposedly. Oh, no, this one. Then you really feel woozy. Thanks so much. Oh, I didn't even use that on drivers. Man, I was even cutting corners. Are you still about 10 minutes, do you think?
Yeah, it was 9 minutes and 20 seconds once.
There we go.
But, I'll probably maybe not be that.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did. It's been a long time. And this, I just, okay. Paul, can I just leave this one on? And should I leave it on or off? Doesn't matter. Okay. All right. So, what just read it to me? Did you do that?
Testing. Yeah, that works good. If somebody raises their hand, let me know. I'm blind without my glasses.
Oh, okay.
I can sort of see, but not that good. There you go. Where'd you go in India? Uh-huh. Dharamsala, yeah. Ah. Oh. Yeah, and Nepal's not that far away from Delhi. It's not that far. Yeah. Uh-huh. This is your fiance and you, right? Yeah. One place I always wanted to go to was the Golden Temple of Amritsar. I really want to see that. Is it really nice? Yeah. There are Sikhs there. Yeah. They do this thing too. They have a big community meal there, and they serve like 100,000 people. Yeah. Yeah. I've only been to Kerala. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to wait until they're ready. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. The title of this is From Worst to Best, the Transformation of Caste Relations in Kerala, India. And the reason I wanted to cover this topic is because I'm interested in social change and how it can be accomplished. And this is a case study of some really remarkable social change, positive social change. Okay, the hierarchical caste system of India has rightfully been called the most dehumanizing social order the world has ever known. The caste system was invented by Hinduism with the Brahmin priestly caste on top, generally followed by the warrior caste, the merchant caste, the laborer caste, and at the very bottom, the dalit caste, the so-called untouchables, who are not even regarded as being within the caste system. They are seen as outcasts. They are called untouchables because to come into physical contact with them is regarded as polluting. All over India and Nepal and wherever Hinduism existed, the caste system prevailed. But the worst place of all, 120 years ago, the most abusive, humiliating, and degrading region on the entire subcontinent for untouchables was Kerala. Kerala was also one of India's poorest states, and it is presently the most densely populated. Where is Kerala? Kerala is the long, slender state on the southwestern tip of India. It is a historically famous world center of the spice trade. It's rich in pepper, turmeric, ginger, cumin, clove, cardamom, cinnamon, coriander, nutmeg grown on its wet green hills. Kerala was the destination of Vasco da Gama and the Portuguese and all of the European explorers who wanted to get to Kerala so they could cut off the Arab dominance of the spice trade. Anyway, in the midst of this luxury in Kerala was a phenomenally sadistic caste system. Kerala treated the untouchable caste on an immensely lower, almost unbelievable level. Here are some examples of how the untouchables were treated. Everywhere in Kerala, there were two separate roadways, two separate path systems, one path for the lowest caste and one for everybody else. Apartheid roadways, similar to today's West Bank. The English word pariah comes from the Kerala untouchable caste, which is called the pariahs. The untouchables were not allowed to go to the temples or the marketplaces. When a man from a lower caste got married, his bride was given to the local Brahmin on the first night. Everyone in the lower caste had to be naked from the waist up, including the women. So no one in a lower caste was allowed to wear like a shirt, a robe, anything from the waist up. And finally, here's the worst. There was a caste in Kerala even lower than the untouchables, and this caste was called the unseeables. This group was viewed as so polluting that even to see them was defined as polluting. The untouchables had to travel around, darting quickly and hiding behind trees. Even their houses had to be hidden. They could not be seen. If an upper caste person did see an untouchable, he had the absolute right to kill that person, and they did frequently, because the upper caste all carried swords. So the caste system didn't only oppress the dalits, the untouchables and the untouchables. There was also a long list of rules in Kerala defining behavior between castes. And Kerala didn't have just the 4 or 5 castes that I mentioned earlier. It had a total of around 500 castes, all ranked higher or lower than each other. And for example, there was a distance that had to be maintained between an upper caste and the lower caste. The distance might be 96 paces, which is the length of a football field, or it might only be 50 paces, or it might only be 36 paces. So you can see how incredibly complicated this would be if you saw somebody like a football field away and you had to figure out who they were and how close you could approach them. Swami Vivekananda, a Hindu intellectual who visited in Kerala in 1896, described the situation there as a lunatic asylum due to the complexity of the caste system and the paranoia it created. Okay, so that was 120 years ago. And then in about 70 years, Kerala went from being the most caste repressive place in India to being the least caste repressive. And so that's what attracted me to this. How did this happen? How did the society transform itself so quickly? I wanted to learn this because it seems that Kerala is a model for positive social change. So the reason that Kerala changed its caste relations is there's 3 basic reasons. Number 1, heroic assertion of individual people. 2, the strident activity of multiple groups. And 3, organized direct actions. I'm going to describe each. In terms of heroic individuals, probably the most heroic was a man named Ayakale. He was an untouchable man. He was born into an agrarian slave caste, and he became known as the Spartacus of Kerala due to his physical bravery. He was also a big, strong guy who was fearless and didn't mind getting into fights. Ayakala organized untouchable caste peasant strikes against landlords that frequently resulted in violent street fights. But his biggest act was in 1893, in an act of defiance. He drove an oxen cart wearing clothes above his waist. That was a no-no. And he drove this oxen cart down a road that was forbidden to his caste. It was reserved only for the upper caste. He drove this oxen cart to a marketplace, and he had a lot of followers with him. So you can see that he broke 3 rules in this. He went to the market, he was wearing clothes from his waist up, and let's see, is that it? The road, which was the biggest deal of all. This single action broke multiple rules, and it led to the abandonment of separate roads for different castes. Another heroic individual was Narayana Guru. He was a Hindu spiritual leader who promoted social equality. He preached his belief in one caste for all human beings. This is a very radical idea at the time. He started a mass movement that opened up all the temples to people of all castes, and he was a huge influence on Gandhi. So those are 2 inspiring individuals, and now I'm going to mention 2 groups that helped change the caste system. Kerala was an outpost of Christianity. This was talked about last week. It was an outpost of Christianity due to the legendary visit of St. Thomas the Apostle. A small percentage of the population was indeed Christians, and the Christian missionaries proselytized to the lower castes of Hindus. Imagine yourself as a low caste person of this time. Do you want to remain a Hindu, with other Hindus viewing your low social status as a punishment for your crimes in a previous incarnation? Or do you want to just join the Hindus and become an equal overnight and believe in a God that loves you and a Jesus that loves you and that you can go to heaven? The missionaries achieved great success in converting dalits, and radical nuns and priests led popular movements for justice among the poor. This pressured Hinduism to reform, and today Kerala is about 25% Christian. Another group that inspired a similar social change was Islam. Islam had had a 1,200-year presence of Arab traders in coastal cities, and the lower castes also had the option of, if they didn't want to become Christian, they could convert to Islam, which regards all Muslims, theoretically, as brothers or sisters equally. The lower castes of Kerala, especially in northern Kerala, often converted to Islam, and this also put pressure on Hinduism to reform, and today Kerala is about 25% Muslim. So you can see that only leaves 50% Hindu, and this is changing the demographics quite a bit. Okay, the fifth and last ingredient for social change is mass organizing actions. The lower caste group started organizing into multiple different groups, just like people do in the Bay Area when they want to get something done. They start organizing. In Kerala, they organized into caste improvement associations, trade unions, reading groups, writing groups, and Communist Party groups. They launched direct actions like refusing to pay rent and demands for land reform. The biggest action was in 1921, a massive group of Muslim peasants protested by rebelling against their Hindu landlords, and their protest took control of police stations, government offices, train stations, post offices, and courts. An estimated 10,000 Muslim rebels were killed and 50,000 were imprisoned, and also thousands of Hindus were killed and forcibly converted to Islam. It was a huge battle. But the organizing continued after that, primarily on the question of land reform, which was a unique possibility in Kerala because it's a rich agricultural state. In Kerala, one family can support itself on just a small amount of property. If you own a few coconut trees, you can make enough money to support your family. It's a amazingly fertile place. India is very interesting. It's supposedly the second cheapest country to live in the world, second only to Pakistan, and the very cheapest place to live in India is Kerala state. Okay, anyway, in 1969, Kerala's government passed a land to the tiller redistribution bill that allowed no family to own more than 20 acres, with confiscated land given to landless peasants. This is viewed as perhaps the most progressive land reform act in world history. And this movement is still going on. Kerala is attempting today to give every citizen in the state land ownership of at least 1,500 square feet, which isn't very much, but it's way better than the United States. Not everybody has land. So today, Kerala is the leader in India in multiple areas. It leads in education, per capita income, life expectancy. It is by far the most religiously tolerant state, and it has the least caste violence. The BJP party of Modi that promotes Hinduism over other religions gets very few votes there. In fact, its candidates are never elected, and the BJP even has very few headquarters in Kerala. I find it inspirational to study Kerala's success at overcoming its repressive past, and I hope you find it inspiring too. Any questions? Okay, go ahead.
1921. The war, this battle, was that the British?
Yes. Yeah, that's true. I took that little section out because it complicates things. That they weren't only rebelling against their Hindu landlords, they were rebelling against the British colonialists. Yeah.
Does Modi and his minions or whatever, do they disturb those people in Kerala? Are they bothered by them going into the forest and trying to kill them and all that stuff?
No, there's not like a war between Modi and Kerala, but they don't. You can see in the newspapers that they don't like each other. I think Modi is really annoyed that Kerala does so well. It scores really high. I think it's called the human, some kind of human. It's not the human, but there's various indexes that Kerala always does well in. They also don't like Kerala because it's communist. It's not that pro-Hindu. They just don't like it. The two major parties in Kerala are Communist Party of India and Communist Party of India (parentheses Marxism). Those are the two major parties. They're not all that communist, but that's their name anyway. Yeah.
But Arundhati Roy, she talks about all those, going in and killing off a whole lot of these people. I wondered if that's the area or if there's other areas of India where that's taking place.
Yeah, there is another group. There's a group that hides in the mountains. They're called the Naxalites. That could be what you're referring to. They live in the jungles, and I think they're Maoists, and they're not only in Kerala. They're definitely in Kerala, but they're also in some other states. They work a lot with another group of people who are supposedly even lower than Dalits. They're called the Adivasi. They're the tribal Aboriginal people. And the reason that I know any of this is because I have a nonprofit that works there, and we fund a school that teaches Dalit and Adivasi kids. Question in the back?
I'm just thinking, I lived in India for like a year, and my God, they treated people badly. The lower class people, I remember rickshaw drivers, I would used to give them a tip, and locals, they did an intervention with me. They're like, you do not tip these people, then they'll come to expect it. And it's just horrible.
Yeah. I wanted just to mention a couple other things here in my notes. The Dalits were allied with the Black Panthers in the 1960s. They even had a group called the Dalit Panthers, and I got to meet a couple when I was there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hank. So how about in 3 minutes, we'll have Joanna Foley come for the last presentation of the day. Thanks so much again for everyone who came out tonight, and thanks again so much, Hank.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm in.
Yes. I was thinking, because see the tab? We can expand this and have, here it is, and have the whole thing. Did I do it? Wait. There. No? How's that, how does this expand? I mean, I'm pressing expand. Maybe this?
Well, you try it and see.
Nope. Oh, man.
Get rid of that, yeah. Okay,
That's it.
we'll
That's
live,
all we can-
we'll
we'll
live
live
with that.
through it.
Okay. Okay, 1 minute. Are we ready? Okay, hello, fellow History Club lovers. What we like about history is the stories, right? It's not those boring details about treaties, the way history is unfortunately too often taught. So I have 2 stories to tell you tonight. One is the national story about Black participation in the American Revolution, particularly appropriate, this is Black History Month. And the other story is my personal story about my family. And I'm going to weave back and forth between the individual story and the national story. My great-great-great-grandfather, Joseph Winston, served in North Carolina militia in the American Revolution, and he fought in 3 battles there, 2 of which the Americans won, and 1 of which they lost. And I don't know that he particularly deserves credit for either the winning or the losing. There is a statue of him now that stands in the National Military Park in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I knew about this vaguely when I was growing up, and I decided to go and visit and see the statue in 2013 when I was in the process of moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. And I imagined that I would go and see the statue and I would climb up and put one arm around the shoulders of my ancestor and hold out a selfie, and none of that worked. The statue is 14 feet high. So I was proud of the things that he accomplished, that he fought in the American Revolution, that he went on to serve in Congress, that he was a trustee, an early trustee of the University of North Carolina. And in a vague footnotish kind of way, I also knew that he had been a slaveholder. And one other thing that I learned from the visit is that he had been disinterred from the family burial place near Germantown, North Carolina, almost 100 years after his death, and reburied there in the military park near his statue. And there was some quaint notion in the 1890s that a place was made more patriotic and more sacred by having some of the leaders of the battle buried there. I thought it was creepy, hadn't known about it ahead of time, wanted to say, put him back with his family where he belongs. So I had made my family pilgrimage, and I filed this experience in the back of my mind, and I thought, well, you know, I'll take the grandkids there someday. And in 2020, my focus shifted to the national level. That was the year that George Floyd was murdered by the police in Minneapolis. And there was a huge upset all over the country, I'm sure you all remember it, about racism and about police violence, and about the representations of racism in the fact that there are statues and monuments to Confederate generals and slaveholders all over the country. And so the national conversation focused on, do monuments represent history or do they represent values? And who gets to decide what values and stories from history get represented in public art. So, in response to this national conversation, another descendant of an American revolutionary, one far more famous than my ancestor, Thomas Jefferson, one of his white descendants, you do know that Thomas Jefferson has black descendants as well. He wrote a New York Times op-ed piece about his ancestor's public memorial, saying it should be taken down because he was an enslaver. There's a copy of that op-ed back on my literature table back there. And when I read that, a picture of my ancestor's statue flashed in my mind, and I said, I have one of those too. Someone who was created, the statue was created at public expense. It stands on federal land, and it's maintained by the taxpayers' money. This seemed wrong on so many levels. And I was kind of overwhelmed. I was embarrassed, I was angry, I was sad, I was disappointed in my ancestor, and guilty, because I knew all along that he was a slaveholder, and I had sort of footnoted it in the back of my mind. And so now it was a glaring headline. And I wrote an opinion piece. Let me see if I can find something here about it. Should the statue of my ancestor come down? And I asked it as a question, but it was a hint. I think it should come down. And this was one of the three schools of thought that emerged in this time of this national conversation. One was take those monuments down, which actually happened in some places. There's a statue of Robert E. Lee in Richmond, Virginia, that was brought down. And nearly 100 memorials of various kinds of racist were brought down in this time period. So when I was writing the op-ed, I was thinking I was speaking to local individuals. I was, in my head, organizing a deconstruction party. And a cousin that I had not known found me and approved of what I was writing. And other people wrote letters to the editors, some pro and some con. Greensboro institutions took up the question. The History Museum called up and wanted to interview me for a podcast. And they asked me to consult in a webinar. And the webinar focused on what about art that's offensive to current standards? Should it come down? And if it comes down, what do you do with it then? So I began to realize that there were other enslavers at this National Military Park. And, oh, here we're getting to representations of my relative. And so I thought, well, if we're going to take him down, we probably should take the rest of them. And I'll make a list and find out who's there. Well, I found out that the commander, the American commander in the battle there, Major General Nathaniel Greene, was also an enslaver. I said, okay, that's not going to happen. The enslavers have too much political power. So the next school of thought about what to do about monuments like this is called retain and explain. So you add some more information. And I wrote another opinion piece, naming the enslaved persons mentioned in my ancestor's will. And I pointed out the political advantages he had gained, that the city of Winston-Salem is named after him, and that he won public acclaim, he was elected to political office, and that his economic well-being was supported by the free labor of the men, women, and children who were working on his farm. And I entitled this op-ed, "Statues So White." And it didn't get published, imagine that. So the third school of thought is, if you can't get rid of the offensive public art, find out what's missing on the site and add new monuments and markers. Historic representations, so to speak. So I began searching for who had fought in this battle and who was not represented. And the story at this point sort of shifted to the national level because it was hard to find the names of the black people who had fought in this local battle. So I discovered through research and reading books and meeting people that the story of the black Americans in the Revolution is really underrepresented. We mostly don't learn about this in our history classes, except for token representation. Now, who's the one person of color that you know about who fought and died in the revolutionary cause? Any answers? Does Crispus Attucks ring a bell? Okay. The Boston Massacre in 1770. And he was a man of African and Native descent, and he was shot, and he was the first to die in the cause of American freedom, along with four white men who were shot that day. And pretty much that's what we learn in American history. We don't learn that there were at least 5,000, possibly as many as 10,000, black soldiers and sailors in the American Revolution. The Revolution would not have been won without the participation of people of color. Who were they? Some were enslaved people, forced to enlist by their owners and promised freedom for their service. Some fought but did not receive their promised freedom. And a few fought and earned their freedom and re-enlisted as free men. Then there were also free persons of color. Some of them hoped that fighting for America's freedom would gain liberty for all African Americans. And some became soldiers for the reasons that other people do. The military pay was better than what they could earn as civilians. And some joined because their relatives and their neighbors were enlisting. And some joined for safety if they lived in an area where the Tories, the British supporters, were well organized and hostile to all who didn't support the mother country. So black men served in every major battle in this war and almost every skirmish. Some had gained prior military experience in the French and Indian War before the Revolution. And in many cases, they actually had to struggle to get into the military. Many slaveholders in government and the armed forces were understandably reluctant to put weapons into the hands of enslaved people. So manpower was short throughout the American Revolution, particularly in the Patriot forces. And eventually, George Washington gave in to necessity and permitted the military services of black people. There were two segregated units. In Rhode Island, there was the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, entirely soldiers of African and Native descent. And then in Savannah, Georgia, there were hundreds of free Haitian men who formed their own military unit. My French is not very good, but Chasseurs Volontaires de Santo Domingo. And they fought alongside the American and French troops in the siege of Savannah. But on the whole, black soldiers mostly served alongside white soldiers in militia companies and state military units. And in fact, the American military would not be so well integrated again until 1948, when President Truman removed the racial restrictions. So black men served in a variety of roles, often playing the drums or the flutes. And these were really important roles in battles of that time because it was a means of communication. It was giving the orders, retreat, advance, whatever the troops were supposed to do next. Because over the noise of battle, human voices couldn't be heard. So some of them bore arms, rifles or muskets. Some of them fired cannons. They served as transport troops, the drivers of the wagons. They built fortifications. And at times, they served as spies. The most famous spy is named James Armistead, and he was an enslaved man in Virginia, and he served as a double agent. He conveyed false information to the British and accurate information to the Americans. And because he was an enslaved person, people didn't pay attention to what he was doing. They just saw him as a servant, and not that he was this extremely clever, useful spy. And he took the name Lafayette as his last name in honor of the French military leader who took part in the Revolution. So after I learned all this interesting information, I thought, why do we know so little about this important aspect of our history? So it's possible that this was embarrassing to historians because far more black people supported the British. The British promised them freedom, and I think we can all imagine that we would have taken the choice that, served our own needs best. So there's also a scarcity of information. The best sources to find out who fought in the Revolution are the pension records. Congress noticed in 1818 and again in 1830s that people were not very quick to join up. There were not a lot of volunteers. And they thought, well, if we pay people pensions for their service, they will be more likely. And that, I won't evaluate whether that worked or not, but it did provide an amazing source of information. If people who had served in the Revolution wanted to get their pension, they went into court, the local court, and they submitted a statement about when and where they served, and they needed to have it verified by their commanders or the people who had served with them. And so the pension applications were written in 18th century cursive, which is hard to read, but recently it's being transcribed by volunteers so that they can be digitized. And so a whole source of information about black people's participation in the war is being opened up. And the other thing is, in these pension applications, people's descriptions are not so black and white. There are things that you can infer that this is a black person. They had dark hair, they had dark eyes, whatever. But the racial categories were not as clear-cut as they are today. So I'll give you one example, and let me find him on here to show you. This is, I may not be able to find him. Okay. Well, I'll tell you about Ishmael Titus. He applied for his pension at age 89, and unfortunately, most of his commanders and his colleagues were dead by then. And he was applying in Massachusetts, and he had fought in the South, so he didn't have many people to support him, and he did not get his pension. Racism might have had something to do with this, of course. So I came to know about this man by an interesting personal connection I made. And one of the times when I was feeling like I wasn't making much progress in this historical representations project, I went to visit the military park again, and I had a copy of my first op-ed. And I ran into a black woman there who at the time was the only black employee of the military park. She was their security ranger. And so I talked to her about what I was doing, and she said, well, the funniest thing, I met a black woman here last week whose ancestor also fought in this battle. And she gave me her first name, which was Sage. And I said, well, that's wonderful. I'd love to get in touch with Sage. And about a month later, I was looking at a Kwanzaa service on Zoom, and there was Sage with her full name. So I reached out to her and told her who I was and what I was trying to do, and she didn't get back to me. And I reached out again, and she sort of felt like she was being stalked at first. But we got in touch with each other, and we've been in touch ever since. And we sort of have, this is going to be too woo-woo for some of you, but we sort of have a feeling that it was meant to be for us to meet each other. We, at one point, got together and did a land blessing ritual at the park. We sang a UU hymn, There Is More Love Somewhere. We did a say their names ritual of all the black patriots in this battle that we had been able to find at that point. And other people walking around the park, we introduced, she said, her ancestor fought here, and I said, and her ancestor fought here. And that ended with a random group of local musicians playing taps. And it was just very moving and felt very much like it was meant to be. So later we found out that Sage's ancestor, Ishmael, had fought in the military company right next to my ancestor's militia unit. And Sage, when she moved from New York, had lived within walking distance of the park without knowing about her ancestral connection to the land at all. And when she found out, she was deeply moved. She'd always had a sense that she should be living there, and she didn't know why. So, Sage introduced me to her cousin, Solomon Titus Taylor, who lives in Rochester, New York. Solomon served in the U.S. Marines for 16 years, and then was a recruiter for a number of years after that. And his life mission is to find all the descendants of Ishmael Titus. And he has found a goodly number of them. They have annual family reunions now. They got together in Charlotte this year, and there were over 100 people, and some of them from other countries. So he, of course, is finding other military people and that's one of his subcategories of his life mission, to find, black patriots. So this is, I feel very connected to, Solomon and to Sage, and I've met some of their other relatives, at least online. Sage is not the only personal relationship that I've developed while pursuing historical reparations. There are about a dozen people that I get together with when I go to Greensboro, usually connected to the History Museum, the library, the military park, the UU Church, a synagogue, or the media. And one of these connections was with Yvonne Johnson, who was a member of the city council, and before that, the first black mayor of Greensboro. And she was inspired by the idea of honoring the black patriots. And she got the city council to finance a commemorative design for City Bus, which named all the black patriots identified up to that time. And an image on the side of the bus, it's called a bus wrap, and it's like a huge mural. And we see them all the time, they're advertising products and services, but rarely do we see them advertising something like historical reparations. So this bus made its debut on July the 4th, 2023, at the city celebration of Independence Day. And to say it was well received is a big understatement. The most frequent comment, particularly from black people, but from everyone, was, "I didn't know." And the second thought was, "Why didn't I know?" And other people said, "My kids will be so proud." And people ran their hands over the bus wrap as if it were almost too good to be true. And they took selfies with their kids. So you don't normally think of a bus wrap as public art, but it is a form of public art. It's mobile public art in that it runs its regular assigned routes around the city. It's mobile public art at the Veterans Day Parade, in which I had the honor to be a part of the honor guard that accompanied the bus in November 2023. And it's stationary public art when it's parked for display and education around events in the city, like the 3-day folk music festival. So Yvonne Johnson saw this bus as a first step towards creating a monument to go to honor the Black patriots. And she had already picked out a site, and she had in mind the local philanthropist who was going to finance this. Unfortunately, she passed on in December. And she was my age, so that hit me in a number of ways. There are other political leaders who may take up the cause, especially since there will be widespread commemorations of our history in 2026. That's the 250th anniversary of our country. Meanwhile, I am glad that I learned, and I continue to learn, about this neglected part of American history. This feels kind of like my mission in life at this stage. Sort of brings together what I have done as a social worker and as a journalist. So I think that the men who fought under these difficult circumstances and did not live to reap the full benefits of American liberty deserve our deepest respect and our widest commemoration in public art. And I hope you will get involved with me in sharing the word. Thank you. Questions? Not yet. Well, I tell you what I have been doing. Some other cities are way ahead of Greensboro in honoring their Black patriots. Buffalo, New York put up a monument 2 years ago that honored the Black participation in all America's major battles. There are 12 Black concrete pillars, and it's gorgeous in its simplicity. And when it was dedicated, the Secretary of Defense was there, and the governor of New York. And I went to visit it on the way home from my vacation this summer. And I took pictures, and Solomon Titus Taylor came over from Rochester with 25 of his relatives, and we had a grand day. And similarly, I've gone to Valley Forge to see their monument to patriots of African descent. And there's a place in Washington, Georgia that has done the same thing. So I'm going around taking photos, interviewing people, and whatever Greensboro does is up to Greensboro. And, you know, I feel like I can sort of carry out my mission of honoring Black patriots by traveling.
Great. Any more questions?
Oh, there are materials back there. The books are for you to take down the names if you want to buy them for yourselves. The paper stuff, you can have copies of whatever's there.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I really appreciate it.
Sorry I couldn't make this work. I'll show you my website.